Hi guys, welcome to our channel Free Coding. In the last video, I gave you a small introduction on Python. I explained about what Python is, why do we have to learn Python, and certain other things about Python. Also, I took you through an environment called Jupyter Notebook, which you could use as a beginner to write and run your source code in Python. Now, in this video, we're gonna cover about variables and data types. It's quite a basic, a basic video about Python. So let's get started here. So first of all, what is a variable? Now guys, whenever you're using a programming language, it could be any programming language, your entire source code would actually move around or run around something called data, which is nothing but the information. So we have to make sure we are storing this information. So there are different ways to again store your data. You could store it in a database, you could store it in in files, you could store it in different files like text file, YAML, XML, CSV. There are different files that you could use to store your data. But what if you want to store it temporarily and in a quicker manner? In that case, you could depend on using variable. So variables are nothing but just a container, or just like a container that you could use to store your data or the information. And every time when you want to store a data, you have to make sure you're giving a name to your variable. That's how you're going to identify, or you're going to access the variable by using the variable name, or access the data by using the variable name. So that's one major thing. And you could store any kind of data. It could be a text, it could be a letter, a sentence, it could be a word, it could be a number, it could be true, just true or false, anything would work. It could be of any type. And when you're creating a variable in Python specifically, you don't need a keyword to create a variable. Like for example, if you take JavaScript programming language, JavaScript requires a keyword called var, let, const, different keywords to create a variable. But when it comes to Python, that's not just in JavaScript. In even other language also, they do require some keyword to create it. But when it comes to Python, you don't need any variable keyword. You could just use your variable name, a unique name, use an assignment operator, and then you could add your data. Now, moving further, when I was talking about variable name, there are certain conventions that you need to follow, certain rules that you need to follow when you want to name your variable. One such is you have to make sure you're giving a descriptive name, a meaningful name. The reason is when your source code length increases, obviously, it would create a lot of confusion when you have lots of variables, like what variable is storing what kind of data. You should always go back and check every time, right? It would reduce a lot of confusion if you give a descriptive name. It would also consume a lot of time when you have multiple variables with some random name. So make sure you're giving a descriptive and meaningful name. And next is no keywords, which means your variable name should never be a keyword that is in Python, that's already available in Python. It has to be a unique name, or else your interpreter would throw an error. And it should start with an alphabet or an underscore. It could never start with a number. So it should be either an alphabet or an underscore. And your variable name can contain alphanumeric or even underscore is possible. No other special characters are allowed in your variable name. And no spaces. Yeah, no variable name should contain any space. And so if you don't have any space, if your variable name has more than one word, to make it more readable, you should use cases like snake case, lower camel case, or upper camel case. And all these rules that I'm talking about, this naming convention, is not just for variables. It's something that you define, even if you define a function, if you define a class, for all the names or for all the objects that you're going to define, has to follow these naming conventions. And Yes. So when it comes to variable, there are different, standard ways that you need to follow for different definitions that you define. So when it comes to a variable definition, you make sure you start it with a lowercase letter, use lower camel case for variables, but snake case, upper camel case would not throw an error, but it would let you stay your variables unique or different from other definitions like functions and classes. Yeah, here are a few examples on how you could name your variable. You have total underscore score, that's a snake case, and you have username, that's lower camel case. So that's the most standard way of writing your variable in Python. And you have final marks, that's upper, camel case. And we do have a special kind of variable, which is nothing but constant here. So of course, variable, just like the name suggests, you could change the value in the variable, but there are lots of scenarios where you want your variable data to be constant. In such cases, you could go for constant. And how do you differ, or how do you say that this is a constant and how this is a variable, is by the way you write the name. So if you use a full uppercase values or full uppercase name, then it's a constant. But it's not for the interpreter, guys. It's for the developers. It's for programmers who are actually programming, in the source code. Because obviously, when you work on multiple projects, when you use lots of variables, functions, classes, and all, this would create a lot of confusion, like what variable value you should change and what you shouldn't change. In such cases, to keep things stand out, that only these values can be changed, only these cannot be changed, you could use a full uppercase name for the variables that you think or that you shouldn't change, the value of the variables that you shouldn't change, so that it's not for the interpreter. Even though if you give full uppercase and if you try to change, obviously it would change. So just for the developers and programmers. So there are lots of mathematical constant, guys. You have pi, lambda, and many more constants that are that are never gonna change. It's always constant. So it's for such values or such information. So yeah, as I said, you have pi, number of days in a week, number of hours in a day, number of minutes in a hour. So yeah, all these are constant, right? That wouldn't change. So those information could be stored under a constant by giving a full uppercase for the variable name. And yeah, there you go. That's how you name it. Pi, gravity, lambda. Now, so obviously when you're talking about variables, we should also be aware of certain data types or all the data types that we have in Python. But today, now we're gonna just discuss about the basic data types that we have in Python. So you have numeric data type. So under numeric data type, there are 3 different data types you have. One is integer, float, and complex. So integer is nothing but any number that does not have a decimal point. It could be a positive number, it could be a negative number, it could be a really long number, it could be a hexadecimal number, it could be a binary number, octal, everything would come under integer. And the keyword for integer in Python is int, int, int. And next numeric data type that you have is, it's a float data type. This everyone should be aware of all these data types, right? So float is nothing but any number that has a decimal point, and the keyword for float is float. Float everything in lowercase. And finally, you have complex. Complex is nothing but having both real part and imaginary part in your data is what complex data type. So yeah, that would be a complex data type. So if you have an imaginary part, that would obviously be a complex data type, and it could contain decimal numbers there. And the next data type that we have is text. So when I say text, I obviously mean string here. In programming language, all texts are referred as string, right? So string, and the keyword for string is str. So string, it could be a letter, it could be a word, it could be a sentence, a paragraph, anything would work, guys. And how would the interpreter know that this is a string? Is by looking at the quotation. So you should make sure you're using a quotation around your string. It could be a single quote, it could be a double quote, it could also be a triple quote, and you have single string, you have single line string, and you have multi-line string. So for single line string, you could use any kinds of quotation. Single quote, double quote, triple quote would work. But for a multi-line string, it should always be a triple quote, triple single quote, or triple double quote. I'll show you with an example. And you have, the last basic data type that we have is Boolean data type. Boolean is nothing but true or false. The keyword would be bool in lowercase. And for true and false, you have to make sure it starts with an uppercase. So TRUT has to be in uppercase. And for false, F has to be in uppercase. Excuse me. And Boolean is like an integer type of data type, which means your true holds the value 1 and false holds the value 0, which also means you could perform mathematical calculations with true and false along with integer and float data type. So now what I'll do is I'll take you through few examples that I have already, created. I'm gonna take you through the how do you create a variable, different ways of creating variables and assigning values to it, and also how could you use these data types. All right, guys. So let me take you through few examples. It's gonna take a couple of minutes, I guess. Oh, there you go. So yeah, this is, I guess I've taken you through this Jupyter Notebook. This is one of the interface that you could use, which is nothing but Jupyter Notebook, which I launched it from Anaconda Navigator. And you have your run button here. You have to just select the cell, click on run, and once you run it, either your output or an error would get displayed right below this cell. This is the cell. All right. So now, looking at this cell 7 for now, x equals to 10, which means I'm creating a variable called x and storing a data called 10 under x. So technically what the interpreter would do is when I run this, it would create a memory location and store 10 inside that location, and it would name the location as x. So when I access when I access x, the interpreter would display the data that is being stored under the x memory location. So if I run this now, you could see print x 10 and y equals to hello. So here, this is string data type. This is an integer data type. So hello is written within double quotation mark. And sorry, I have not explained about print, right? Print is nothing but it's one of the built-in functions that you could use to display the output. And y equals hello, like y, a single operator is nothing but an assignment operator. The one that you have on the right side of the assignment would get assigned to the one that is on the left side of the assignment operator. So hello is getting assigned to y. And we have another function called type. Type is also another built-in functions that you have in Python that would tell you what kind of data this particular variable y is storing. So that would be string, right? There you go. The output is str. Now z equals to 12.3, which is a float data type, and type of z would be float. And this is complex, right? So a equals to 12 plus 3j, which has both imaginary, real and imaginary part. So type of a would be complex. And you have bool1, bool2, two variables. True and false are being assigned to it, and type of bool1 would be bool, the Boolean keyword, the bool keyword for Boolean data type. And so these are a few simple example, guys, where you create a variable, a single variable, and assigning a single value to it. Now, here is another way of creating multiple variables and storing multiple values in it. So On the left hand side of the assignment operator, you could write all your variables and separate it by comma. And on the right side of the assignment operator, you could write the data and separate the data by comma. So it would get assigned in the order. So when I say X, Y, Z, Y, and on the right, you have 10, 12, 13, and hello. So 10 would get stored under the first variable, which is X. And 12 would get stored under the second variable Y, and 13 would get stored under the third variable Z, and hello would get stored under the last variable Y. Now, if I run this, and you could just print one by one. So print of Y would be hello, and print of X, print of Y, print of Z. So hello, 10, 12, and 13. So it is just following the order there. And yeah, this is another way of assigning values to a variable if you're assigning the same data for multiple variables. So X equals Y equals Z equals 10, because I'm assigning the data 10 to 3 different variables, which is X, Y, and Z. In that case, you have to use multiple assignment operator. Instead of separating it by comma, you have to separate it by assignment operator. So print of X is 10. So I could also try print of Y. So that would still be 10, guys. So that's it for this video. It's just an introduction to variables. Before getting into more detailed concepts and advanced concepts, we have to make sure we are strong with our basics. So that's why these few examples are. So let's see you in the next video. Until then, bye. Take care.